Okay, so welcome to my presentation on DC. Um, if anybody hasn't been to DC, it's a very interesting city for a number of reasons, but as I was able to find out, it's very, very interesting in terms of its urban forest. So there's over 2 million trees in DC that are overseen by a host of different agencies. There's 30 different national parks with some 7,000 acres of parkland available, and most of those parks are overseen by the National Park Service. And so um, they the National Park Service uh, administers and manages all of the trees on those parks, and there's also a small section of the city just down the street from me on the Capitol grounds that is managed by a different entity, a different government entity called the Architect of the Capitol. And the Architect of the Capitol is an actual person appointed by the president, and it's an agency that is built of artisans and architects and builders, but also arborists as well that oversee the Capitol grounds, the House and the Senate buildings, the Botanical Gardens, and the Supreme Court. Um, and then there is the DDOT, which is the Department of Transportation, and the Urban Forestry, which is nested under the Department of Transportation, that oversees all of the street trees and the trees that are in on school grounds and in, I guess, well, non-federal cemeteries, because we actually have federal cemeteries here in DC. I think the budget here in DC probably outpaces all of the other budgets by quite a bit. There was a $5.5 million budget for the fiscal year this year. Last year, the Urban Forestry Division, on a budget of just $252,000, planted 8,640 trees. So the city has taken a very proactive approach to trying to improve tree equity. It's trying to improve access to parks. It's trying to improve the overall tree canopy coverage. They set a goal of 40, reaching total UTC by 2032 of 40%. Right now it sits at about 38, and it's been at about 38 since 2016. And it's kind of plateaued there, and it's kind of stayed stagnant. And there's some reasons behind that, which we can get into later if we want. But I'll move on to my area and my tree inventory. So I decided to go at this from a socioeconomic perspective. I wanted to understand how gentrification may or may not be playing a role in how the urban tree canopy coverage, the species of trees, the species diversity, and the age of trees is being affected by socioeconomic factors. And so I chose a neighborhood that I'm not really familiar with. You can see down at the bottom center part of my slide here that the district is broken up into eight wards, and the tree canopy coverage in wards 3 and 4, which is where I do a lot of my work. That's a very, very affluent part of DC. And the areas that are across the Anacostia River down to kind of into the southeast corner of that map, 7 and 8, and actually wards 5, 7, and 8 are pretty socioeconomically impoverished, and have been for a long time. And so I wanted to kind of understand how, like I said, how socioeconomic factors play a role in DC's urban forest. So I chose Carver Langston neighborhood, which is about it's about a mile from me, to the northeast a little bit. It just sits just south of the National Arboretum. It sits right in the kind of the neck of the Anacostia River. So it actually, when it rains, it drains right into the Anacostia River basin there. Um, and it's a historically black neighborhood. And so I kind of did some digging on some of the demographic information to try to kind of understand what the level of economic demographics were in this neighborhood. Like I said, I don't have a working knowledge of this neighborhood, but I I wanted to understand how uh, the influx of wealthier, whiter residents were affecting the tree species. So I did some digging and I found out that the average income in 2012 in this neighborhood, so a little less than 10 years ago, was $39,000. Today, uh, the average income is $106,000. Most of the homes predominantly were built before 1939. The overwhelming majority of houses in my section of the Carver Langston neighborhood were built before 1950. But the average home price now is $550,000. So you can see that um, there's been a an influx of money into that neighborhood. So my original hypothesis was, again, not knowing anything really about this neighborhood. My original hypothesis, knowing that it was an older neighborhood, knowing that it was a historically black neighborhood, and um, knowing that it was socioeconomically depressed in certain aspects, was that the tree canopy coverage would be low, the species diversity would be low, and the age of the trees would be high. So again, my survey was partial. I surveyed the lower southeastern half of the neighborhood, which comprised about 10 city blocks. It was all residential. I didn't do any parks. I didn't do any schools, which there are parks nearby and schools nearby. Um, but my findings were very, very interesting, in my opinion anyway. It, I did an iTree uh, canopy coverage and benefits analysis, and found that uh, UTC coverage was 35% in the neighborhood. And if you included herbaceous, which I did, that brought it up to 48%. The average DBH of the tree was 15.8 inches. So still, um, I think it's early functional was what it's called. Age of tree. There were 49 different species present in the survey area, which I was very shocked by. I did not anticipate that. And 52% of the trees that I surveyed comprised 32 different genera. The overwhelming majority of the trees were oak and were, again, they were different species, but oak and elm comprised 32% of the trees that I surveyed. And most of those trees were all found on one street where that picture is taken. Those are all pin oaks. Um, and the interesting finding was that even though elms and oaks were represented 32% of the species, they only represented 5% of the genera, which I thought was very interesting. So again, I had a few recommendations. The first one, which I actually have down at the bottom, would be to try to figure out what the canopy coverage is in a similar area in adjacent neighborhoods. So this would be something for somebody, if I could get in touch with with an official from the city, which I was unable to do, or somebody from, say, like Casey Trees, that might have some better knowledge, or some more current knowledge on some of the inventories that have been taken, if they have been in some of those adjacent neighborhoods, to try to conduct an assessment as to how those neighborhoods fared compared to this neighborhood of Carver Langston, because they're very similar in demographic makeup, they're very similar in racial makeup, economic makeup. So that was my kind of my number one recommendation. It was more of an academic recommendation to see what the urban tree canopy, the species diversity, and the age of trees would look like in those other neighborhoods. Um, the other thing that I noticed when I was doing my survey was there were very few conifer trees, and I'm not sure. Maybe this is just I don't know enough about the climate. Maybe this isn't the right climate for those trees. Maybe it, in this neighborhood, that's just not the type of tree they want to have. But so one of my recommendations was to plant conifers, and then to because the tree species, or because the average DBH and the age of tree was pretty young. One of my recommendations was to try to enact a pruning schedule that would ensure these young trees would be able to be structurally pruned over the next 15, 20 to 25 years. And then to plant some more, and I have my species list is in my report, but to plant some more medium-sized trees that would help promote some more growth. Thank you.